So we're being told that the Chris Billam-Smith, Richard Riakporhe rematch is set to take place later on this year. Obviously, this will be for Chris Billam-Smith's WBO Cruiserweight World title. The first time they fought was way back in 2019, where Riakporhe was able to get a split decision win over 10 rounds. Chris Billam-Smith took a count in the 7th. It was a real tough, grueling fight for those of you who haven't seen it. I think it might still be on YouTube if you want to go check it out. Now, for my money, both fighters have improved, but I think Richard Riakporhe has improved a bit more than Chris Billam-Smith. In fact, I've been quite impressed by the amount of improvement that Richard Riakporhe has shown over this past couple years, because early on in his career, I really wasn't sold on him at all. And I'm not saying that Richard Riakporhe is the best cruiserweight in the world right now, but I definitely, at this point, think he can go further than I did, let's say, a few years ago. He didn't want the smoke with Jay Opataya, let's be real, because that fight was there for him. He was mandatory challenger, he could have taken it. And in taking on Chris Billam-Smith instead, it's a case of Richard Riakporhe selecting what he perceives to be low-hanging fruit. Again, it's not like Chris Billam-Smith isn't a tough fighter. It's not like their first fight wasn't competitive, it was. But I'm sure when Richard Riakporhe looks at Jay Opataya and then compares him to Billam-Smith, he sees Billam-Smith as the much easier fight. Obviously, Chris Billam-Smith draws in a crowd at Bournemouth, so they're looking to potentially do it there. There's also the possibility of Selhurst Park Stadium in South London. Obviously, Richard Riakporhe is from South London, so I guess it'll be maybe flipping a coin to see where they end up doing it. But with Chris Billam-Smith being the A side in this equation, because he is the champion and he has got this proven track record of selling tickets, I would imagine it's more likely to be in Bournemouth. And based upon their most recent performances, I would have to go with Richard Riakporhe to beat Chris Billam-Smith again. If we have a look at Richard Riakporhe's record here, his last fight was in November last year against Dylan Bregan. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He stopped him in 2 rounds. Before that, of course, he had that good win over Krzysztof Glowacki. And by the way, Glowacki tested positive for a banned substance and received a ban. I think it was a 4-year ban by the British Boxing Board of Control. But Glowacki is retired now, so that's neither here nor there. It was quite similar to a journeyman, a Polish journeyman, God, I forget his name, Sokolowski, excuse me. He also was banned by the British Boxing Board of Control for, I think, 2 or 4 years for a positive PED test. But again, he just retired as well. So it's like this strange situation where the British Boxing Board keep banning people that have already retired. Amir Khan, same thing. He had retired and they gave him a ban. Very, very odd. Anyway, Richard Riakporhe, relatively active, fought twice last year, twice in 2022. So it's not like he's coming off a big long layoff or anything like that. Now, the quality of opposition hasn't exactly been great, particularly his last fight against this Bregan guy. But with Chris Billam-Smith, again, he's been fighting a high level of opposition, but he's been struggling. You know, in his last fight, he fought Masternak. That was a real struggle for him until Masternak just gave up midway through the fight when he was surely comfortably ahead on the scorecards. Well, actually, look at the scorecards here. One of them, Steve Gray, had it even, which is an eyebrow raiser to say the least. But the other judges had it 68-65 and 68-65, both of them in favor of Masternak. I don't know what Steve Gray was watching. So based on their most recent performances, I would certainly favor Richard Riakporhe, combined with the fact that he's already beaten Chris Billam-Smith before, combined with the fact that, at least from my perspective, he's improved more than Chris Billam-Smith. But maybe you guys disagree. That's okay. The first fight was competitive. It's not at all beyond the realms of possibility that Chris Billam-Smith could get revenge over Richard Riakporhe. But this fight really has the thinking of Sky and Ben Shalom written all over it. Because these are the kind of things that promoters often like. If there's a dangerous fighter out there who is signed to a rival promoter, as Opataya is, and they've got an alternative world title fight and world title defense for one of their guys, you know, an in-house world title fight, they'd rather go that direction because whoever wins is still going to be with Ben Shalom and Boxer. Whereas if they had Chris Billam-Smith fight a unification against Opataya and Opataya wins, as most people would expect, then they've just lost the world champion from their stable. Or if Richard Riakporhe had taken that Opataya fight and lost, they've just lost a viable contender because, you know, there's a very good chance he would get destroyed in that fight. I'm not saying definitively that he would, but you look at the way Opataya is moving, you look at what he did with Breedis, there's a good chance that he could ruin a guy like Richard Riakporhe. So I'm sure Sky would want to get more mileage out of one of their fighters. They would rather preserve him for a while, get some more long-term paydays from him before feeding him to a beast like Riakporhe. So it's got the Sky and Ben Shalom thinking all over it, or the promoter thinking all over it. It doesn't mean it's a bad fight. It doesn't mean that it's not credible. It's a credible fight. But it's not maybe the fight that a lot of people would have wanted to see, because Richard Riakporhe, if one thing can be said about him, he is a very good puncher. So that would kind of at least give him some type of chance against Riakporhe. Because I don't think Riakporhe has really faced any punchers as big as Richard Riakporhe other than Breedis, who might be a bigger puncher than Riakporhe, potentially. But you take Breedis out of the equation, who did break Riakporhe's jaw, and there isn't really that many massive punches on Riakporhe's record. So Riakporhe would be in with a puncher's chance at the very least. A lot of people wanted to see that fight for that reason. Anyway, I'll stop waffling. Let me know what you guys think about this news in the comment section below.